It is Liberation Day in America, according to President Trump. Economic liberation, that is. President gave a I would say that it was one of his best presentations today about the tariff situation. And the reason it was worthy in my estimation is because he kept it simple. And the facts that he presented, with a little bit of wiggle room because it's complicated, were pretty much right on. I couldn't check them all, fact check them all that fast, but it's pretty accurate. And tomorrow we'll go over in the Talking Points memo all of the sniping that will go on tonight and in the newspapers about how bad Trump is for Americans and on and on and on. But the intent, this is important, of what President Trump is trying to do is fair. There's no doubt that countries all over the world have taken advantage of the United States. No doubt about that. There's no other argument. You cannot counter that argument. And once you get in a position where China is our rival, and China is benefiting from trade to the United States far more than we're benefiting with trade from them, you got to look at this. We don't trade with Iran much. That's not a factor. Russia doesn't do a lot of work over here, but China does. And then the EU does. And what I liked about the speech was that Donald Trump brought out a chart, and I have to get a little credit for this because I suggested to him and Elon Musk, when you make a complicated point, use a chart. Okay, and I didn't come up with that concept. Karl Rove did. Remember Karl Rove with the little white thing? Got annoying after a while. But when you have an illustration like that, it slows everything down and people can focus in on what you're saying. Okay, so the Talking Points memo is whether this is good or bad for you. We all need money. That's where we start. We all need money. And in America, you can hit it really big. I have. But I worked my butt off. I got educated. I obeyed the law. And I prospered. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And that is why I believe this is a noble nation. But I understand how hard it is. And with manufacturing jobs declining because companies, large companies, take their plants and put them in Mexico, in China, in places where they don't pay high salaries, that makes it harder and harder and harder for people to make a good living. You can get by in America, but to prosper, to build assets, it's much harder. And the more that we make here, the more manufacturing that happens, the quicker that's going to rise and offer more opportunity. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. All right? DEI, go back to that. Well, inclusion is you and giving you a pathway to success. That's what Trump's trying to do. There's no malevolence here on his part. Sometimes there is. And we'll talk about that a little later on in this broadcast. You know, sometimes Trump is a little revenge motivated. This isn't. This is basically, he's a businessman. He sees this as not a good deal. And one further point before we get to the specifics. Presidents don't want to do this. Okay, so not since World War II has any president. Eisenhower kind of thought about it, but he didn't do it. No one has taken on the unfair trade policies across the world. No one. Why? Because we were prospering. Even with the unfair trade, America is still the richest country on earth. Trump just wants to make it richer. He wants to give more opportunity to people to build assets, which is noble, I think. Okay, let's get specific on this. So the first thing that he does is come out and go, it's Liberation Day, and We're going to make America wealthy again. You know, the usual political rhetoric, and you've heard it a million times. But he then zeroes in on the bigger picture. Go.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, in American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper, and in so doing, use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt, and it'll all happen very quickly.
I don't know if it's going to happen very quickly. The president should pray that it does, because if it doesn't happen quickly and it doesn't benefit you, Democrats will win the midterms. So this is big. This is rolling that dice. Most other presidents would not do this. Biden didn't even think about it. Second soundbite, specific on automobiles. Every American needs a car, unless you live in New York City where the mass, but you have to have transportation. Go.
Toyota sells 1 million foreign-made automobiles into the United States, and General Motors sells almost none. Ford sells very little. None of our companies are allowed to go into other countries. And I say that friend and foe. And in many cases, the friend is worse than the foe in terms of trade.
And there's no question that's true. South Korea, Japan, Germany, most of Europe block U.S.-made cars from being sold in those countries by imposing huge taxes, VAT taxes, and charging outright tariffs like Japan. Okay, when I go to Japan in May, I'm not going to see any American cars. When I go to China, after I go to Japan, I'm going over to China. I'm not going to see any American cars. And then I'm going to South Korea, and I'm not going to see any American cars. There is a reason. They're too expensive. Those governments make American cars too expensive. Final soundbite I want to play for you is about China in particular, but food. We all need food, right? Go.
And China charges American rice farmers an overquota, it's called, a tariff rate of 65%. South Korea charges 50%. Actually, they charge different, from 50% to 513%. And Japan, our friend, charges us 700%. But that's because they don't want us selling rice and other things. Who can blame them, Madam Secretary? Agriculture, great job you did on eggs, by the way. The egg prices came down 50%.
And that's true. And gas prices coming down as well in America. So summing up, Trump is correct. The speech was good. I don't know what is going to happen, but I hope it works. And that's the memo.